Dear colleagues, welcome to the webinar, Innovative Universities. My name is Isaac Frumin. I'm a co-host of the webinar, and this is our last webinar of the academic season 23-24. During this academic season, we traveled around the world, and today we landed in the country, which is a continent by itself. It's the most populated country in the world. It's India. And it's my great pleasure to talk today with the founding Vice Chancellor of one of the most interesting, unusual universities, not just in India, but I think in the world. But before we go to the conversation, let me remind a couple of housekeeping rules. So our webinar lasts 60 minutes. Usually we have short presentation in the beginning and discussion. It's going live. Usually, we have this webinar at 5 p.m. Central European time, but often we need to accommodate the time to take into account the time differences around the globe. So those who cannot make it to watch and participate in the live discussion can always watch our webinars on YouTube and share with us impressions, not just with us, but with the broader community, impressions via hashtag Innovative Universities. I'm co-hosting this webinar with Dara Melnik, higher education consultant. Unfortunately, she cannot be today with me. So Raj and I will be talking just between us. And I also want, in the end of this season, to thank the members of our steering committee for recommending us interesting universities. And I have to say that Phil Albach, professor from Boston College, was the person who recommended this particular OP Jindal Global University to be featured at the webinar. And when we looked at the profile of the university, we realized that indeed it's important to talk because Indian higher education system is the second largest higher education system in the world. Some people think that it's the first largest higher education system in the world by the number of institutions. And it's super diverse. It has very famous, well-established public research universities like Jawaharlal Nehru University or University of Delhi, etc. It has famous network of Indian Institute of Technology, etc. But here we have OP Jindal Global University, which is a private and which is super accelerated university, using our term from our book with Phil Albach and Jamil Salmi, when we discussed this phenomenon of rapidly developing universities. And the person who was, and I'm very happy to say is, behind this super rapid development is Professor Raj Kumar, founding Vice Chancellor of the university and the Dean of OP Jindal Global Law School, as I understand. And also, Raj is a great scholar, legal scholar. I've looked through his books on human rights and governance, corruption. It's very, very interesting. And what's very specifically interesting about our guest today, that he went around the world to get his own education. And Raj attended the most prestigious universities in the world. In his country, he attended University of Delhi, then Oxford, then Harvard, then University of Hong Kong, where he got his doctorate. And now he's leading this very interesting university. Professor Kumar, it's a pleasure and honor to have you today with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Isaac Froman, and it's an absolute delight and a pleasure for me to be part of this Constructor University's innovative university speaker series. I also want to thank Professor Philip Allback for essentially suggesting our institution's name. Is it audible, Professor Froman?
Yep, very good.
Okay, great. All right. Well, essentially, I think we are, of course, a very relatively newer university. This year is very special for us. We are celebrating the 15th anniversary of our university this year. And on 30th September 2009, we began our journey. And this 30th September 2024, we'll be completing 15 years. What I thought I will do is that before we enter into a dialogue and a discussion, I'll briefly introduce the university, but also the vision and the context behind it. For many of us who had the privilege to study in India and then to go abroad, and I am not suggesting just me, but a generation of individuals who had done that, one of the things that immediately struck was the extraordinary impact of higher education as well as institutions in the larger context of both institution building and nation building. I was no exception. I studied in two good Indian universities, Loyola College Madras and University of Delhi, and after which I got the roads to go to Oxford and I landed up in Oxford in the year 1998. And I was at that time 24 years old. And I was fascinated by the education that I was exposed to in terms of its intellectually engaging ecosystem, the strong commitment to research, the deeper commitment towards excellence, but also the importance that was given to the idea of a transformative education and how it can impact the future. And at the same time, I was also conscious of the fact that India had a very long history and civilizational heritage towards institutions. While Oxford and Bologna are 800 and 900 years old, Indian subcontinent had universities such as Nalanda, Takshashila, Vallabhi, and Vikramshila, dating back to over 2,000 years. They were higher education institutions of learning, but they had also attracted both learners as well as teachers from around the world. They had a very strong commitment towards advancing knowledge and dissemination of knowledge. And so India was not, or Indian subcontinent was also not stranger to the idea of institutions. But it is only fair to say that both the pre-independent India and post-independent India in 1947 onwards saw the evolution of higher education institutions, and with the very modest number of universities that began in 1947 at the dawn of Indian independence, when we had 20 universities when we began our journey as a country. Today, after 75 years of independence, we have over 1,000 universities, nearly 50,000 plus higher education institutions, which are all in a position to offer degrees, and of course, nearly 1,700 plus law schools and several thousand business schools. And so the higher education system has so dramatically grown in terms of its size, in terms of its impact. But equally, it also became an aspiration for a large number of young people to pursue higher education. Since the independence, all we can say is that the demographic situation in India has enabled a large number of Indians to aspire to study and to pursue higher education. So it was in that context and milieu, I was experiencing education in the UK, at Oxford, and I was inspired by the education and I essentially asked the question, are there world-class universities in India, and should India be looking at such institutions? That was just a thought of a graduate student. I didn't know much about higher education. And so with that thought process, I began the journey in my mind. And then I landed up at Harvard, did my master's there. That opportunity was even more inspiring and transformative. I was fascinated by the diversity of the class itself at Harvard. I was part of a master's degree program where we were 150 students from 82 countries in the world. I met students for the first time from countries whose names I knew, but I never had opportunity to meet. It was a very strong, intellectually vibrant ecosystem. And of course, I was fascinated by the idea of higher education and began to read a lot about the growth and evolution of universities. And I was inspired by the early evolution of the Humboldtian model of research university from your own country, where the Constructor University is located, but also how it transformed the world of education and how it inspired the American higher education system from its own origins, and then to transform them to become more research universities. So the modern research university was really a compelling idea that grew out of Germany and then essentially inspired the world. And so with that vision, I had the opportunity to, be at Harvard, graduate of Harvard, practiced law in New York. And during that time, I became even more interested in the idea of, institution building. I then, taught in Japan for some time, and then later for many years in Hong Kong. During those years, I wrote a paper entitled Establishing India's First Global University. And I was inspired by universities around the world in my academic work and both in terms of research and writing and scholarship. I traveled around the world. I looked at universities in Singapore, South Korea, Taipei, Japan, but also Western Europe, North America, Canada, and also frequently traveling to China and to India. The more I traveled to China, I was deeply inspired by what I saw in China. The Chinese were building, not only reimagining their universities, but also drawing inspiration from the best of institutions in the Western world. India was also building universities, but we were also not paying enough attention to quality, let alone excellence. We were also conscious of the fact that we had a huge demand for higher education and hence had to build more and more universities in India. As Isaac mentioned, the early evolution in India were public universities, but since the late 80s and early 90s, we privatized higher education. And so we began to have a rapidly growing number of private higher education institutions. But unfortunately, that evolution did not lead to the promotion of excellence. There were a large number of private, mediocre, arguably for-profit institutions. And so in that process, there was a deeper sense of pejorativeness associated with the idea of private higher education. That journey continued for a very long time. And so when I was thinking about the idea of a university, I was conscious of the fact that we need to overcome this sort of social pejorativeness associated with the idea of private higher education. We also need to overcome the need for having enough resources which are not necessarily not-for-profit oriented. I was fascinated by the American model of not-for-profit, private philanthropic idea of universities, which, by the way, is a very rare exception. Nowhere in the world, we have such strong level of private philanthropy as it is the case in American higher education system. And I was trying to see what we can draw from India, for India. Anyway, to cut the story short, I wrote a paper entitled Establishing India's First Global University and got to meet with an Indian benefactor by name Mr. Naveen Jindal in the year 2006 and got to meet with him and spend a year persuading Mr. Jindal to do three things. One, to make a substantial financial commitment. Second, to do it in a not-for-profit manner. And third, to let me have the academic freedom and autonomy and independence to build a world-class university in India. By late 2007, Mr. Jindal agreed to all of it and invited me to move to India. I moved to India in early 2008. And from 2008 onwards, we began the process of institution building, literally from scratch. And that's a very unique story because it was quite rare that a university literally came from nowhere and started the journey. So I want to begin the slide by showing something to the viewers of this program. And that is how we started the journey of OP Jindal Global University in the year 2008, when nothing was there, and we began the campus in a place called Sonipat, which is in the state of Haryana. And the idea was to build something from the scratch, but also to have the high ambitions and aspiration that can potentially transform the landscape of higher education. Yeah, this is how we began in the year 2008. Nothing was there. All we had was an empty piece of 54 acres of land, and we had cranes. We had an amazing architectural design. A French architect by name Stéphane Pommier was our architect, and we had unlimited supply of Jindal Steel, which is our manufacturer's company, and that's how we were feverishly, building a campus from scratch. As late as 27 January 2009, the government of Haryana passed the legislation to establish the first private university in the state of Haryana, which is the neighboring state of Delhi, and we are located in the national capital region of Delhi. And that was a very defining moment when the law was passed and I was appointed as the first Vice Chancellor of the university, and we began the process of construction of campus, recruitment of faculty, and admission of students. As late as 30th September 2009, we began the first academic session of the first school of the university, Jindal Global Law School. And as you can see, 2009 was our beginning year. We began the journey with 112 students from India, 20 faculty members and staff, all from India, in a 49-acre campus, which has had a 100,000 square feet of built-up space. Today, fast tracking, we are 15 years old. We have 12,500 plus students from 75 countries and regions of the world. We have 4,000 plus faculty and staff from 50 plus countries and regions of the world, and they both represent all states and union territories of India. Our land is approximately 100 acres, and our built-up square feet is over 4.5 million square feet. In terms of growth and evolution, this is what has happened to us. Our academic and intellectual spread across 12 schools and the 4 institutes defines the academic vision of our university. We have a law school, a business school, a school of international affairs, a school of government and public policy, a school of liberal arts and humanities, a school of journalism and communication, a school of art and architecture, a school of banking and finance, a school of environment and sustainability, a school of psychology and counseling, a school of languages and literature, and a school of public health and human development. These 12 schools and the 4 institutes, which includes the Institute for Leadership, Institute of Behavioral Sciences, Institute of Education, and the Jindal India Institute. These 16 of them, the 12 schools and 4 institutes, form the academic agenda of the university, where we offer over 50 undergraduate, postgraduate, masters, and PhD programs. We are a very, very internationally oriented university, and we take the middle name, the global, very seriously. As you can see, our students end up coming from 70 plus countries, our faculty and staff from 50 plus countries. But more importantly, we are very conscious from day one to be able to connect with the world. We have established substantive international collaborations with over 450 universities in 75 plus countries, and they are across the world. But one of the things that is the challenge in academic institutions is that the collaborations and MOUs end up remaining as paper tigers. Not much ends up happening with them. But we are very fortunate that from day one, our collaborations were live collaborations. We took the responsibility to collaborate seriously, and we ended up having 10 forms of international collaborations with these universities. They include faculty exchange, student exchange, joint teaching, joint research, joint conferences, joint publications, dual degree programs, short-term study abroad programs, inward mobility immersion programs, and joint executive education programs. These 10 forms of collaborations form the heart and soul of our international relationships. We may not do all the 10 with a single university partner. We may do 1 or 2 or 3. If we end up doing more than 3 with a single partner, they become one of our strategic partners, and we have few of them around the world. The second aspect of our university is our strong commitment to interdisciplinarity. We all know that universities are in many ways silos when it comes to disciplines, schools, faculties, departments. Most of the time, the geographical location of a school or a faculty essentially creates barriers and disincentives for both students and faculty to gain the benefit of interdisciplinarity. Sometimes policies, including regulations, may also impact the possibility of collaborations. Sometimes it's pure geography and lack of proximity between schools and departments may end up creating disincentives. But we are very fortunate that from the very beginning, we decided we will not have a single building that will represent any particular school or a department. All of our infrastructure or shared infrastructure, which can be used by all schools and programs. And hence, from day one, we have been able to make our university interdisciplinary. And so today, I'm happy to report that every day after 3 p.m. in the evening, all the way till 10 p.m., we are a residential university. We offer over 400 electives for our students every day, so that regardless of whichever school or program you belong to, you have opportunities to cross-register courses and take courses in the other school or program. This opportunity to pursue interdisciplinary learning has also created opportunities for faculty to collaborate in pursuing more interdisciplinary research, and which is reflected in our publications as well. The third aspect of our university is our strong commitment to diversity. 50% of our students are women, 55% of our faculty members are women, and we have ended up offering over the years, over 50% of our students are receiving some form of scholarship or the other. Essentially, our commitment from day one has been that we want to ensure that students should not be deprived of an opportunity to study at OP Jindal Global University simply because they can't afford. And of course, every year we do try and make our efforts to do better so that more and more students are able to access our education. The fourth aspect of our university is our strong commitment to research and knowledge creation. We have 60 plus research centers, 4 research and capacity building institutes. Our faculty members have produced over 6,000 plus publications. 1/3 of them are Scopus, have received over 10,000 plus citations, 150 plus interdisciplinary research projects. And the funding, including major benefactors for research projects, include Indian and international organizations such as United Nations, Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, the UNDP, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Ford Foundation, and other such organizations, including our own organizations under the Government of India, have been awarding projects and research grants. Our faculty members have produced nearly 200 books, and that has formed the core of our intellectual agenda. Because of the fact that we are a non-STEM and non-medicine university so far, our publications in these fields have been quite remarkable, which has directly contributed to our rankings. And that's my last point on this, which is that we have been now consistently ranked as India's first-ranked private university with the QS World University Rankings, but also our law school has been ranked #1 in India, as well as 72 in the world. And lastly, I must say that we have also been declared as an institution of eminence by the Government of India, a very significant policy initiative brought by the current government, led by the Honorable Prime Minister of India, where the idea was to identify 10 public universities and 10 private universities and give them the status of an institution of eminence with a view to propel them to become world-class universities in the years to come. We are the only non-STEM, non-medicine university in the 8+4. Although the vision was to select 20 out of the 1,000 plus universities, they ended up finally selecting only 8 public universities and 4 private universities, and have given these 12 institutions the status of an institution of eminence. All right, let me quickly move to our next 10-year strategic plan. We intend to move forward as we look at the future. We want to move into STEM, medicine, and allied health sciences. Our goal is to build 10 new schools in the next decade, to set up the Jindal International Science and Technology Academy, where we hope to establish a school of engineering and technology, a school of artificial intelligence and robotics, a school of data sciences, a school of natural sciences, a school of biotechnology and biomolecular sciences, followed by a school of medical sciences, a school of dental medicine, a school of nursing and palliative care, a school of physiotherapy and rehabilitation, and the school of pharmacy and allied sciences. The vision is to be able to have these 10 schools established by 2034. We also have plans to expand our campus, and we've already begun the process of land acquisition contiguously to our campus. We want to double our campus size, double the built-up square feet of area, nearly double the number of schools, more than double the number of students, more than double the number of faculty, significantly expand our international footprint, also increase the number of programs that we offer, and also more than double the centers and the staff as well. Our vision is to achieve this by 2034, when we will be celebrating our 25th anniversary. As a university, this has been our mission, and we intend to work towards fulfilling that, which is to build the future of India and the world. Our vision has been to be a world-class university creating global leaders. We've identified five aspects to be our core values, which is a good acronym called IDEAS. One is to have an impact through our work, to promote diversity, to pursue excellence, to protect academic freedom, and to advance values of sustainability. These are five of our core values, and we are working towards achieving them. I want to leave you with this piece, this particular photo, which is our campus. As you can see, it's grown significantly from where we started in the year 2009. Thank you very much, Isaac, and I look forward to chatting with you as well as taking questions.
Yeah, thank you. It's an impressive picture, and you, in fact, while you were speaking, I thought about a few questions, and just to clarify some remaining.
Sure.
So my first questions will be, again, to clarify the picture, to understand it better. So, but I have to say that you answered already on one of them, because I was wondering that Jindal company is, if I remember correctly, is Jindal Steel and Power Company. And I was surprised that your university doesn't have a school of metallurgy or engineering, but now you told that this is in your plans. In fact, these plans are even probably more ambitious than your current stage of development. So maybe we'll start with that, because again, we completed recently a study of private universities in Europe. And we found that there are almost no private universities, really private, not, for example, belong to Catholic Church. Private universities in Europe, research intensive in areas of science and engineering, especially in science. Our university is very unusual in this term. We have very strong school of science. But, and the reason is very simple. It's super expensive. And you compete with the government institutions. So this your vision to build 10 new schools. And again, I understand that medical schools could kind of pay for themselves, but to build science and engineering schools, it's a challenge to make them, I would not say financially sustainable, but to make them at least not to be a huge burden on your budget. So how are you going to build these science and engineering schools in the future?
Thank you so much, Isaac, for that question. But let me begin that question by first saying why we chose the path that we did. It was not about the resources at that time, but more importantly, I was deeply concerned by the growing deterioration when it comes to study of humanities and social sciences, not just in India, but around the world. I was also deeply concerned by the single-minded focus of private universities on STEM education. So if you look at the Indian scenario, even when the 1980s and 90s, when privatization of higher education was happening, it was largely establishing engineering colleges. And by the
Mm-hmm.
way, engineering colleges are actually good cash cows. So if you will never find till us, we were the first private university essentially having exclusive focus on humanities and social sciences and professional schools in law and architecture. Hitherto, the private university imagination was largely focused on engineering and science and technology a bit, and then of course medicine. So we are an outlier there, and that gap
Mm-hmm.
had to be fulfilled. And since we have established, and I'm happy to say that some other institutions have emerged, which have equal focus on humanities and social sciences, and we have been somewhat of a pioneering effort on that front. But having said that, um, we were also conscious of the fact that if you want to have a comprehensive university in the world of knowledge, it is not enough for you to just be an institution that focused on humanities and social sciences. And in any case, if you really want to advance the interdisciplinarity that we have already done in what we do, the real interdisciplinarity will be to take that vision of humanities and social sciences into STEM and medicine. And that's the biggest challenge we plan to confront for the next decade. Now, as far as the costs are concerned, you're absolutely right. So far, our expenditure is largely on hiring amazing people. That's what humanities and social sciences ended up having,
Mm-hmm.
besides classrooms. But the moment you go into STEM and medicine, you have to invest on equipments and laboratories and machines and even expensive machines. And we're conscious of that. Our benefactor has already put in nearly $500 million towards the university for the last 15
Mm-hmm.
years. And my plan is to seek little more than $500 million for the future as well. And he has been very positively inclined in that vision, and we hope to take it forward. But the idea of pursuing excellence and pursuing excellence to interdisciplinarity, pursuing excellence to research, pursuing excellence to internationalization, pursuing excellence to experiential learning, all of that is as important in STEM as it has been in humanities and social sciences.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's clear. Very interesting, and in fact, yeah, you reminded uh, our audience that indeed the landscape of Indian private education is very different from European one. Indeed, Indian private institutions more focused on engineering, IT, etc.
And I
Okay,
said from our independence, I should just add, sorry to butt in, I
no,
just want to say from our independence in 1947, we've now had a complete tectonic shift in the landscape. When we started off, we were all public. Today,
mm-hmm,
I want to report to you that 70% of Indian higher education institutions are private, 70. And 70% of Indian students in higher education are studying in private higher education institutions. So both in terms of the number of students and the number of institutions, the private sector is dominating. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm only factually reporting to you that the growth and evolution and that's largely and probably unfortunately that the government has steadily reduced its own
mm-hmm,
government successfully for the last 75 years have been reducing the GDP investment in relation to higher education, and and the demand for higher education has grown rapidly. Another data point in India is that while we are a country of 1.5 billion people and the world's largest population now, the reality is 1 billion of them are less than 35 years of age. Just think about that. 1 billion people who are less than 35 years of age, whose demographic aspirations are to indeed pursue higher education. So we have a huge demand for higher education with a very, challenging gross enrollment ratio, which is still hovering around 24 to 26% when we should be having double of that to cater to the needs and aspirations of young people in India.
Yeah, in fact, you came to very important question I wanted to ask about the selectivity. I know that, for example, Indian Institute of Technology, they have more than 100 applicants for one seat. So they are super selective. How is selective your university?
Yeah, so you are absolutely right. All over the world, the idea of merit has been measured largely through selectivity and the number of applications per student. We are indeed, so how it happens is different schools are within the university have very different situation. If you look at our law school, for example, which is one of the most highly selective situation where, almost one student out of 10 to 15 applications will be the case in the law school. It gets almost half or so in the business school, and other schools, it may be 3 or 4 times more than the number of seats available. But equally important is that, unlike the typical public institution, our selection of students are not only based upon that one examination a student ends up taking. We challenge that notion when we create it. So typically in India, university system is such that the high school percentage and the marks or whatever you obtain at the 12th grade pretty much defines and determines your destiny and future. And your ability to gain access to any form of university education, including college education, is dependent upon the marks that you obtained in the 12th, and in some cases, one entrance examination that you have written, where, as you rightly said, millions of people take up that exam, and a very, very small set of people end up getting in. We have, in our university, from the very beginning, have had a more holistic approach towards selection, drawing a lot of inspiration from other parts of the world, where one exam alone should not determine the destiny of your future. And hence we have taken into account, statements of purpose, your overall contributions in terms of your activities that have undertaken during your school and college life. All those things have also contributed to the selection process.
Okay, that's clear. But compare Indian Institute of Technologies, forgive me, but it's an interesting and obvious benchmark. They are free, so they can do this merit-based selection only. You have to think about tuition fees as well. So my question is, what is share of students, admitted students, that do not pay because of their social background, they don't have means to pay, or they receive some discounts or scholarships?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have in that admission process that I talked about, we have a scholarship policy that ensures that every student who applies to us is considered for scholarship on the basis of what we call the merit cum means test. What it essentially means is that to put it very crudely, if your income tax return, which is the cumulative income of a family, demonstrates a certain amount in terms of the parental salary that the person is having, that will become the yardstick to measure whether the person is eligible to receive scholarship or not. So you may be, if you're a topper, let's say, and you are admitted, But if your income tax return of your family is such that you belong to the upper echelons of society in terms of affordability, you do not receive any scholarship. So our scholarship policy is not needs blind. It is merit cum means. But on the other hand, if you have been able to get admission and your income taxes returns are such that you are in a position to receive scholarship, then we have a scaling scholarship method where we provide scholarships up to 100% of the tuition fee, and then 75%, 50%, 25%, and even 10%, depending upon the situation you are placed. So in that context, if I look at the entire university, I'm happy that 50% of our students are studying with some form of scholarship or the other. And this was part of the original commitment that our Chancellor and benefactor, Mr. Jindal, did, which is that we should make every effort to make education affordable. So we did two things. One, we ensured that the tuition fee structure is much less than similarly situated institutions in India or abroad. So that was the first thing that we did, because if you make the tuition fee, so our average, tuition fee is literally it's 4,000 to 5,000 US dollars. That's our tuition fee, and so that's significantly less than what we provide, largely because of the fact that the benefactor was invested nearly $500 million, which we don't connect it to the tuition fee that we are charging. And on top of it, we end up providing more than 50% of our students are on scholarship. So the moderation of the tuition fee and the cost of studies on the one hand, and the accessibility provided to scholarship on the other hand, both of which has been able to make our student profile more diverse and more committed to pluralism, given the fact that many people can't afford. But I will say this, that even after that, every year, we do have a situation where some students may not be able to afford despite all these efforts, because they may not be able to afford to pay for their food and accommodation and things like that. We don't provide scholarship for living cost. All students are expected to pay for the living cost, although it is subsidized, but still we don't provide scholarship, and that also means that some people can't afford even that.
Okay, it's so the economic model. So I understand this access policy, and it's very important that, like many good private universities, you are trying to be also inclusive. And as I understand, it's possible significantly because of the benefactor provided this line of funding for that. Is it endowment, or is it annual grant for the university? What's form of support?
So it's a grant. It's a grants in demand. Whenever we want money, we ask him, and he gives. I mean, the good thing is that the university is named after his father. So who is no more, and he. All I can say is that he has also seen the university grow and to have achieved so much of success. In the year 2006 and 7, it was a long shot for him. His father had died in the year 2005, and it was idea was to make a tribute to the father, and he provided that. But today it's a different situation altogether. Today he is seen in his eyes, and he's living through the fact that in fact, I must tell you a recent anecdote I had exchanged with him. I asked him just a few months ago that does he know who is Andrew Carnegie? And he said, yes, I know he's a great philanthropist, and he built institutions in the United States and also in other parts of the world. Then I said, well, that's all fine, but do you know that he was the largest steel tycoon of the last century? Andrew Carnegie was the richest and the largest steel tycoon of the last century. But you know what? You didn't know about it because his contribution as a philanthropist was much greater than the fact that his steel company was the most influential company of the last century. And I said, one day your situation will also be like that. People will remember you not so much for the Jindal Steel and Power, but the fact that you built this university and we had a good laugh.
Oh, that's a great story. That's a great story. I will tell you a quite different story from my current university that had the name of Klaus Jacobs, who also donated a huge amount of money at some point, but then the foundation, for different reasons, stopped the recurrent funding. But yeah, that's a super interesting story. And in fact, thanks. I will repeat this story about Andrew Carnegie when I talk to possible benefactors. Okay, I have probably last factual question, and then we'll discuss lessons from your experience. My last question is about this model of Global Research University. I remember that there was an article of one of my good colleagues about the expansion of this model, Global Research Universities around the world.
Was it Jami? Jami had written something. He's part of a steering committee.
No, it was not Jamil Salmi. It was Catherine Morham from Arizona State, and she mentioned that, and it was probably 10 or 12 years ago, and the impression was, okay, this model is globally accepted, fine. But now we see a growing criticism toward globalization, etc., etc. This rhetoric. And so have you been ever accused for bringing this purely Western model because, for example, Indian intellectual traditions are different. People like to meditate. They don't want to compete too much for research grants, etc., etc. So how did you combine this global model with the roots in Western Europe and United States and UK with depth and breadth of Indian intellectual tradition?
Yeah, thank you so much, Isaac. But very interestingly, I don't see that this is any particularly Western model, although I will say that we drew inspiration from a lot from the West as well. I mean, if I mentioned about Nalanda, Takshashila, Vallabhi, and Bikramshila, these were actually global institutions. Both teachers and the taught ended up coming from different parts of the world. They were interdisciplinary in terms of their breadth and spread of knowledge. So in the idea of globalism and global engagement is not at all alien to India. Indian subcontinent and Indian civilization and Indian heritage had a very strong and deeply embedded cultural imagination towards the idea of drawing inspiration, and our, in fact, even more contemporary times, India's leading freedom movement actors, including Mahatma Gandhi, who studied at the University College London. Our first Prime Minister, Pandit Nehru, went to Harrows in London and then later at Cambridge. Our President Sardar Patel, Radhakrishnan, you can name the leading figures of Indian freedom movement. They all had quote unquote Western education and drew inspiration from both East and the West and all of that. So in a way, that part of it was not a major challenge. But you are absolutely right. In India, like any vibrant democracy, there are all forms of criticism that emerges relating to all forms of ideas. And that's how it should be. Ideas should be contested, questioned, challenged. And this is also an idea that was challenged even before. And all I can say is that my famous story, which was narrated to me by one of our international board members, Mark Galanter, who was a professor at Wisconsin-Madison. He said when Stanford University was established as a tribute, Leland and Jane Stanford had established that university as a tribute to their son who died early. And Stanford, and we have very similar interesting parallels, which he told, because Leland Stanford was a politician and a governor. Mr. Jindal was a member of parliament and a politician. And so he was also a railroad company guy. Mr. Jindal is in steel and power. And when Stanford was established, a major New York newspaper said that they predicted the imminent doom of Stanford, that Stanford professors will be teaching to empty classrooms. This was the major headline in a New York newspaper. We do have such challenges where criticism, both in terms of the idea of a private university, the idea of a global university, and the focus on global engagement. But India has also played another interesting leadership role in having global imagination at a relatively lower cost. And I'm going to give you the most interesting data point on that. I don't know whether you are aware that Indian scientists have more recently completed 2 successful missions to both Mars and to the moon. And the cost of each of these successful missions was 75 million US dollars. And in the United States, Hollywood movie Interstellar and Martian had spent 100 million US dollars to make one movie. So we are global leaders in frugal innovation. Indian scientists have been able to do actual mission to Mars and Moon for $75 million. So we also benchmark ourselves not only with the view to engaging globally, but the last point I will say is that, which is where we come from, which is that internationalization and benchmarking excellence need not be the sole prerogative of the Western world. Aspiration to have world-class universities and democratization of that aspiration is also part of what the Global South is doing in response to its own aspirations, its own needs, its own demands. And we are a microcosm of that aspiration.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with that. In fact, I have nothing to add. Let me move to the last point before I ask you about lessons. And this is exactly the unique feature of your university. It's speed of development. I can admit that in my career, I was asked by quite a few people who wanted to create world-class university from scratch in few years, and they asked for silver bullet. And I was very conservative. I usually told them that you need at least 20 or 25 years to build really world-class university because you have to build traditions, faculty, etc. I gave different examples. My favorite example is Hong Kong University of Science and Technology.
Yes. Yeah.
Another example was
Nanyang Technological University, NTU in Singapore could be another example.
Absolutely. But also in Russia, when Russian liberal government in 1993 established Higher School of Economics, it was a group of 25 students, and now it's competing with Moscow and St. Petersburg state universities. And
yes, absolutely.
It's also very young, but your speed is unprecedented. So could you share some secrets how so you grew, and also your size? Because I understand if you have unlimited money and you build very small institution like 1,000 students, you can make it excellent and world famous. But 12,000 is a decent size. So what were the stage of this and secrets of this super rapid development?
Thank you so much, Isaac, for that. Um, First of all, I think the most important thing I would say is that not only the resources of the benefactor, but the complete trust and faith that the benefactor had on me and our ability to do what we're doing. And the reason this becomes important in India, unlike many other places, and although there are challenges there, is that we don't have this type of culture of philanthropy where donors would give money and just let go of it. Even in the Western world, there are occasional controversies when money is given by benefactors and then how much control they exercise. But generally speaking, when universities and schools are named after individuals, the deal is that they name it and then there's very little real control or any form of major interventions. And that has been a well-established tradition in the United States and in other parts of the world. Unfortunately, in India, that's not the case. So we are somewhat of an absolute outlier in the sense that here we have an extraordinarily, impressive business tycoon and somebody who has made his resources in a big way, but was ready to put in the money and be conscious of the fact that he will have very little control, if at all, in terms of what happens in the university and who gets hired and who gets admitted, both of which are the most critical things. And that, I think, is probably the most significant reason why we have been able to do what we have been able to do. The second thing, which you know very well, is that, and all I can say is that the three things that are most important in any organization is people, people, and people. So basically, it's about hiring amazing people and expecting them to do the best and inspiring them to pursue a calling in life. We are very fortunate that we have been able to have both faculty and staff, a good number of them for whom this is not a job, this is a personal calling in life. And so when you have such amazing people who are pursuing this as not as a job or an employment, you do achieve extraordinary results in a relatively short span of time. And the third is that we have remained what Steve Jobs would call hungry and foolish. We have been very entrepreneurial. We have not been able to, we never, felt that we are comfortable. We constantly wanted to innovate and continue to innovate ourselves. We have challenged and entered into areas where, few will, venture. And all of that means that we have kept the students at the center of that entire enterprise and hearing them and their views, perspectives shaped our thinking. That's a third thing I will say. And the fourth thing I must say is that the growing liberal regulatory environment in India. When we started off in the year 2007 and 8, the idea of a private university means also extraordinary control exercised by the government and regulatory bodies in terms of permissions and approvals and licenses and constant inspections and accreditations and all of that. And you know that India is, the Brits had left us, but we still continue to inherit the license Raj. But over the years, I have seen dramatic transformation in the mindset of people in the government and a change in the approach towards both liberalizing the regulatory regime that governs higher education, recognizing the agency within institutions to maintain higher standards of excellence, and trusting and empowering universities to be able to do the right thing. In fact, the Institute of Eminence Policy is a phenomenally unique example, which was done by China 30 years ago, and Japan and Russia and others in some
Germany?
time ago, and Germany as well. So other countries have done this, but we are pretty late in that journey. Nevertheless, it was a very important decision that government of India took. And the last bit I would say is that the recognition by the parents and students that no longer history and pedigree matters in terms of what a university does. It is current learning opportunities, quality of faculty, quality of research, learning outcomes, and intellectual ecosystem the university creates. In fact, today it is many of our students who end up coming here have opportunities to study in the leading universities in India. I don't want to name them, including the ones you took. And they have left those institutions and preferred us. Of course, I will say our biggest challenge even today will be how do we make it more accessible? Because the reality is public universities receive public funding, both in terms of cost and, I mean, just to give you a perspective, it's nobody can compete with them. An undergraduate degree in Delhi University is approximately, the tuition fee is $100 per annum. I mean, who can compete with them? So that's our money, the taxpayers' money. So we still have to figure out how we can balance the issue of affordability, accessibility, scholarship, and sustainability. And that remains our biggest goal.
We almost run out of time, Raj. It's so interesting. I have many more questions, but probably just to clarify the secret of rapid development. You mentioned people, and people who are not hired just for filling the place, but people who might be themselves drivers. In fact, when I asked this question about your university, when I asked Phil Albach this question, he said, you know, I have an impression, he said, that they hire an excellent person and give this person for some time to test this person, resources and freedom to work very, very, very fast, to achieve, to implement very big ambitions. If it works, it pays off. If not, it also happens. But is it correct kind of characteristics of your approach?
Philip, as you know, is a very quiet observer, and he's so sharp in observing it. So you're absolutely right. He was absolutely right. That's exactly how we do. And this is a constant empowerment. So one of the things we did from the day one is that, and maybe because of the fact that I had the opportunity to see the best and not so best of the West and the East before I came here. And I was conscious of the fact that even the best of the universities ended up creating a mega bureaucracy where decisions are so driven by hierarchy and authority, and people below have far lesser role to play in the idea of institution building. Of course, when you're 300, 200, 300, 400 years old, it doesn't really matter. But when you are beginning and we are relatively small, you want to expect a large number of people to be able to have the same passion, the commitment, the dedication, and I would even use the word, the obsession to be able to be part of that reality building. And that's what has happened with us.
Thank you very much. I guess it's a very strong message to those who want to develop the institutions rapidly, and I hope we'll meet again. And I really recommend our audience to look at some materials about this very interesting, unusual university. Thank you very much. And may I say to our audience that we have a summer break now, and we start our new season in September. We already have a few universities ready to be presented. One of them is in Mexico, famous technological university in Monterrey. Another is super interesting University of Continuing Education in Austria. And So let's stay tuned. Good summer, and Raj, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Isaac, and I look forward to hosting you in India and our university sooner than later. Thank you very much, and thank you to all your colleagues at the Constructor University for making this happen.